Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me for Real Talk NFT, where we talk about all things NFT, Web3 related. As you know, I'm your host, Brian. You know my amazing co host, Joe. And we have an awesome guest here for you today, JVMI, a leading generative artist. He just recently had a drop on the base blockchain called Swatches. Both Joe and I are big fans. We're actually holders of the project as well. So we're really excited to have him on the podcast. JVMI, thanks for popping on, man.
Appreciate it, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Hey, we're happy to have you here. I know you've been busy and pretty interesting background, but you want to maybe tell us a little bit about your background? I would love to know maybe like before Web3, if you were an artist and how you got into Web3. Just a little bit of the background would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Always happy to talk about it. I've been an artist my whole life, basically from as long as I can remember. I mean, from the early days of like in elementary school, like drawing comic books with comic book characters with my friends and stuff, and kind of have always had like an artistic uh, pull, just in everything in life. But it wasn't until probably 5 or 6 years ago that I started to take my art and design and like all of the creative outlets that I kind of played with for fun to a more serious level. I previously, before crypto and Web3, I mean, I've learned how to code. Like I've been an engineer for like 8 years now, and I also have a big interest and background in streetwear and fashion. So I actually ran my own streetwear company for about 3 years, like right after I graduated college, while I was working like an engineering job, and it was like really that loop of like uh, basically like creating products and putting them out there and like selling them and getting feedback and like the whole creative life cycle that I think was the first time that I actually tasted how that is to kind of like put your art out there, put your creations out there and have people consume it and like kind of like vibe with what you're creating. And I think that was like the first time like I had done that, and that brand was super sick. I don't really run it anymore, and it kind of took a backseat. But that's the same time that I was introduced to Web3. So I basically came into the space as an engineer. I was working at like a big tech company prior to that, and was really like dragging my feet in that job, and wasn't really too excited in what I was doing. So I used to be a back end engineer, but then during that time, I wanted to basically learn like design and then like front end stuff because I had done all of that in like my free time, but never professionally. So I self taught myself like all of the front end libraries and languages, and started kind of putting myself out there as like a Web3 engineer. So I kind of finessed my first job. Like I lied that I had front end experience and stuff, but I didn't really know how to do much. And I worked at this Web3 like dev studio almost, where it was just like me and like three or four other people. One of them was like a guy that was super connected in the hip hop space. So what I did for a year with them was I essentially built NFT projects for other artists, and I kind of learned
Uh,
how to do that. And I was like doing the technical side of a lot of that stuff. And prior to joining that company, I was very straight up, where I was like, I'm doing this because I want to do this for my own art. So it was a really cool learning experience, and throughout that time, I I really like got tapped into the space and kind of understood where and how a lot of things move. It was when I worked at that company, it was like I got in like right before the 2021 hype cycle, rode that, and then saw everything crash. So it really like gave me a full iterative loop on kind of what kind of sells, I guess, and then what sticks around, and like kind of what has hype, but then what kind of hype is like unsustainable and kind of selling something to people that they themselves are confused about and doesn't have longevity. And like I kind of formed all my opinions during that time with no skin in the game, which was super helpful for me because like as an artist, I like the most important thing for me is my integrity, and I never wanted to like
sure.
put something out there and like be wishy-washy about what you're selling. And I found that in that time a lot of people were honestly selling snake oil as NFTs, just to make a quick buck. But it was really useful for me to like learn that stuff. And then it wasn't until at the end of that job, I basically I was like I had an NFT project during that time. I spent like 6 to 8 months building it. It was all like hand drawn art, and I learned how to do the generative stuff in terms of like writing scripts to get that going. But that project did not take off at all. I dropped it like right after everything crashed, and like no one had any appetite for NFTs. So I like built this full ass project that honestly, that project was probably like the most work I've put in to an NFT project. But it never really saw the light of day. And one of the things that I experienced during that project was I literally paid like 5 ETH in gas to deploy it, and
Oh
I like
yeah.
saw none of that back. And that was a moment where I was like, all right, like this is a big problem here. And that kind of is what led me to get more interested into the L2 space. One of my really, really good friends and one of the guys that introduced me to crypto in the first place, he worked at Optimism. So it was during that time where I basically wanted to like get into the L2 space and see, what's good there, because I found that at least for artists, like it made a lot of sense in my mind. Like that clicked, especially through that experience. So I've been working at OP Labs as a front end engineer for about 2 years now, and then throughout that time, I've had a lot of fun and released a couple of NFT projects.
Man, what a wild story. So I've always been a big fan of generative art. Obviously, I have like the squiggle in the background, and I've always been a big fan of like what they've been building at Art Blocks, and just love how there's like a beauty of like coding and art that go hand in hand. When you refer to the original NFT project, was that Motorheads you're referring to, or is it a project that
No,
never
it's
saw the
it's
light of
not
day?
it's not Motorheads. It's
Okay.
it's a project that I had previously, which it never really saw the light of day. It's called the Bootleg Buck Mob. It was like basically it's actually on OpenSea, but it's not minted or anything. But it was like me trying to combine streetwear and NFTs, where I was gonna
Oh,
create
cool.
like this hand drawn like collection where I was kind of like going more towards that space because that's kind of what I had come from at that time, which is something that I'm still in the future wanting to tie together, but I don't think we're there yet, personally. So that project I feel was like almost maybe a bit too ahead of its time. But yeah, Motorheads was what I did after that, and then most recently, Swatches is my latest project.
Yeah, I like your Motorheads project. Well, I love your Swatches project, and that was a big reason why I wanted to get you on the podcast. Like I said, Joe and I are big fans and holders, but kind of like perusing your portfolio and your profile, I saw the Motorheads, and I was like, man, these are really cool. So really great work there, and I saw that it was by recreating the cover of like "Boys Don't Cry" from a photo shoot of Frank Ocean, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, yeah, that was Frank Ocean is one of my like all time favorite artists. I'm obviously not a musician, but I've find a lot of parallels with like how he puts himself out there and like kind of what I want to emulate. And Blonde is like one of my favorite albums. So I when I did Motorheads, I wasn't necessarily like wanting to create an NFT project, but prior to then I had never messed around with like 8-bit style art. So I wanted
Yeah.
to like basically recreate the aesthetic of that in an 8-bit style. And then I made the first one and then kind of just kept going from there, and then it turned into a collection.
Tell me a little bit about Swatches. That seemed to caught a lot of fire here. A lot of big names, collectors are following it. You're being coined as the Chromie Squiggles of the base network. So there's a lot of like exciting parallels, I'm sure, for you as an artist, and especially a generative artist. But where did the idea or inspiration even come from, and how did you move forward to even launching the project?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, Swatches is my first fully generative art project. So I think one of the first like driving factors for what eventually created Swatches was I wanted to like sit down and create a project that was fully generated by code. So like I didn't want to hand draw anything. So that was like one of the constraints that I put on myself. And then I also wanted to do something new in the space because like kind of what I talked about before, where I saw that like a lot of NFTs, I mean, even today, like they're basically just photos and like videos, and for the most part, like the media that we consume with NFTs are not necessarily fully taking advantage of what's available to us in a digital form. So when I was creating swatches, initially they were just like the like preview images that you see on OpenSea, so they weren't actually interactive. I was initially just doing I was writing a script that generated those images. And then it's funny that people like kind of compare it to like the Chromie Squiggles of base, because that for me that's like a huge compliment, because Snowfro is one of my like all-time favorite generative artists. And I was on OpenSea one day, kind of just like looking at random art and like seeing what was out there. And I was on Snowfro's dash 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 collection, which is basically a collection where if you look into the description of the NFT, there are like keyboard shortcuts that you can basically manipulate the image that you're looking at with. And that concept struck a chord with me really, really hard, because I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that that was possible, that you could do that. And I like understood how that was done technically after I saw that, and I had like all the skills to do something similar. So because of my front end engineering background, so then after Swatches was like I generated the images for it, I was like, okay, this is like a pretty simple image that I can do a lot with technically, like animation wise and like interactive wise. So that was when I basically took Swatches from like a normal, like smaller scale generative collection, and like invested a bunch of time and like creative energy into getting it to be like the first of its kind in the sense of like an interactive art piece. Because I just vibe with that vision. I feel like the way that NFTs are like now and for the future, like we're really just like pushing the envelope on digital art and what is possible with digital art, right? Like you can make things interactive and the art can move when you put it into a digital form. So I was really trying to like take that concept and go far with it.
Yeah, personally, I vibed with your art immensely because I missed like the whole art wave of 2021, 2022 when I got into NFTs. And because of Brian, he's such a big NFT art as I check out all the interactions that you just mentioned. The first thing I saw was a dark mode. I was like, oh, dark mode. I love it. Immediately, I said, I need one of these. And then Brian was educating me. He goes, yeah, you could do this with Chromie Squiggle. I was like, you could? Like, I had no idea you could do these intricate things with art. So, like you were saying, there's some cool aspects to NFT art, different than regular artwork. And then I found your customs, which was really, really cool. How did that work? I mean, I know you said everything was automated, generated, but I could probably see some personal touches. I mean, are you a big SpongeBob fan, Dragon Ball fan? Like, there's so many different types of Easter eggs in there. Like, how did you program that and generate that type of artwork? Was it all random?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I was asked this before too, and like the concept of generative art, I feel like the past cycle was it was very like pure in a sense, where like people were like, okay, what generative art is, and like kind of what a lot of the art box collections are, is that the algorithm itself is the art that's like kind of how it's viewed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Personally for me, like that's really cool, and like I respect the like the intention there, where it's like you don't want to meddle with anything. But for my aesthetic and my personal art touches, I kind of like doing a hybrid approach, just because of what you said with the Easter eggs. So the way that Swatches was formulated is that like uh there were 100 essentially like hand drawn or like hand generated pieces that I threw in that happen at even intervals throughout the collection. So there's like 100 of them, and the collection is 7777. So every 77 like token IDs, there will
Mm.
be a custom swatch
Ah.
basically, and that's kind of how I formulated the collection. And the way that I made those was I basically made them on Illustrator, and then I had a script that would take the custom SVG that I generated, and it would essentially create the metadata for that to be a swatch, and then it would put it into the collection. So all of those were like hand generated, I guess you would say.
Wow.
But then it like cohesively fits with the collection in the same like technically.
Wow, that I did not know that that was hand generated. That's great to see kind of like a hybrid approach to that. I really enjoy the customs. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think Brian told me this, but you enjoyed the second or the number one highest secondary sale of any L2 on Ethereum. Is that true? And that was for the base custom for 10 Ethereum. Was that the one?
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest sale for swatches. Now, as for it being the second highest L2 sale, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, that happened like a couple days after the collection launched, when the hype was like all time high, like everybody was jumping in, and it was Koopa. He's a pretty big name on Farcaster. He came in and he bought the base swatch for 10 ETH, which was awesome to see.
What are some of I'm looking at your customs right now. I have some of my own personal favorites, but do you have a few that you just really love?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, I really like the like pop culture ones. I think that Joe was saying before were like the SpongeBob ones and like
Yeah.
the Dragon Ball ones. What I did to organize that was there are almost like sets of sets within the customs. So like SpongeBob, you basically have like the entire family of like SpongeBob, Squidward, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton, and there's also a similar thing with Mario, where there's like Mario, Luigi, Yoshi, Princess Peach, and Bowser. And I like intentionally did that there so that there would be like an appeal to kind of collect and curate like a SpongeBob set almost, or like a Mario set, and like
Yeah.
kind of throw that type of thing in there. But one thing that I'm not sure that people know this, but there's um there's a bunch of rainbow like one of ones basically. So like
Mm-hmm.
there are some that essentially are just like color. And if you put
Hmm.
all of those together, it actually forms a cohesive rainbow. So if you take
Cool.
the red, orange, yellow, and you put them side by side, the last color on the red, like the next color on the first color on the orange and last color on
Oh,
red,
that's slick.
it's a line basically. So if someone were to collect all of those and put them side by side, it makes one image.
Interesting.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
I see a speck of green on the orange one. Oh no, that's an orange. My
Oh,
bad.
that yeah, that's an orange.
That's an actual orange. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a bunch of
these are
Easter eggs
awesome.
in the one of ones. I think like I made the one of ones like a week before launching, and I like just one weekend I kind of just went crazy with it. So yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff in there.
I see one that kind of gives a tell on where you're located. I see Muni, and only a few people know. I know Muni. I'm in San
Yeah,
Francisco.
yeah.
Are you in the Bay?
I'm in the Bay. Yeah,
Right.
I live in SF.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
there's a
have no
Golden
idea
Gate.
what that is.
It says public transportation. When I saw that, I was like, this
Oh,
JVMI must be in the Bay Area because
Yeah.
who's putting Muni as an NFT art? Cool.
yeah, they're a lot of fun. The customs are really awesome, man. You crushed it here, and with them being interactive, I remember. I don't know. It's been years now. It feels like a lifetime. But whenever people would first like on crypto Twitter, when people first discovered that like squiggles could move, you could change the speed, you could change them to like light and dark mode, and there was this huge like sweep of the project. People were like, "Can they move?"
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. But yours take it even to the next level. I guess with your connection with optimism, I mean, you're front end dev there, and then you express the issues of like how Ethereum magnets obviously extremely expensive, so it makes a lot of sense to migrate over to an L2 and launch this project. Uh, I would imagine the answer is probably with your connection with OP and things, but was there a reason you chose Base over some of the other L2s available?
Yeah, so my history, I guess, is like like Motorheads was my first L2 project, which was on OP
Hmm.
mainnet. That came out, I think, around 2 years ago. And the main intention behind that was like really early to the game. For OP mainnet, like when Motorheads launched, there was maybe like five NFT projects on the network. So that made sense at that time because it then became like one of the biggest projects on OP mainnet. And I kind of wanted to do the same thing with Base, because when Swatches was dropping, well, when I was creating Swatches, I actually didn't know where I would release it, because I'd been working on it for like on and off for a pretty long time. But then it wasn't until like the maybe 3 weeks before launching, I was like, okay, I think Base is the right like place to go for this because it was pretty hot, and as it is still is pretty hot. And there was no like art project on base. There were like other NFT projects where there's like on-chain guys and a couple of other NFT projects that were more like utility focused, I would say, and not really just like pure
Hmm.
art. So I felt that there was kind of a gap there to fill. And then that's mainly the reason why I chose to launch on base.
Yeah, I think it was a smart move because you were the first artist to go on base, so definitely grab some attention there. On a similar note about blockchains and you being a generative artist, what you're hearing, what are you hearing around the blocks from, your art friends or whatnot, or even yourself? Is there like a blockchain that specifically, vibes with artists? We know everything was on Ethereum in the past meta, right? The past cycle. But have things shifted at all? I'm seeing, some artists go to Solana now. Like we just had Grant Yoon on, and he's talked about his Solana launch. We know Bitcoin is where a lot of people like having their data stored on chain. What's like you and your cohort's belief? Because that hasn't really been a major topic until recently, until Bitcoin Ordinals it just came out like 15 months ago, right? So what's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think we're all kind of formulating our opinions as we go on a lot of this stuff, and it's really cool to see. Like initially, I used to think about different blockchains almost as like different websites. So like, you're kind of on SoundCloud as a musician, or you're on Spotify, or you're like on Apple Music, or you're on all of them, right? So that's kind of like the real world analogy that I use to explain to like people who are not really into crypto and not embedded into the ecosystem. But then after you kind of feel it around and you are more tapped into like what's going on, I really feel like for different chains, there is a bit of a cultural difference between them. Like Base, for example, is very like builder focused because that's basically what their marketing kind of portrays. So I think Base attracts a lot of people that are just building like general projects. And then Solana, I'm not too tapped into, to be honest. I haven't like released anything on Solana. I don't collect anything on Solana, but I've seen some pretty cool projects come out of it. Like I'm a big fan, like watching from afar of like Utes and D-Gods, just for like the aesthetic purposes. I think those collections really hit that hard there. So I wonder if like the vibe on Solana is different from like Ethereum or Polygon or like all these other chains. Like I wonder if it's like the same people collecting on all the different chains, or are there like actual um like separate audiences there? That was always a question that I pondered, where it's like we see different like addresses and different like collections popping up, but I wonder if it's the same people that are kind of interacting with everything. People obviously have like very strong ties to certain chains for reasons, but the way that I see, like now that I've been in the space for a while, I think that people just move to wherever something's hot. So like I don't really think there is true loyalty amongst like different chains and stuff. I think people like once you get your once you understand like how crypto works and everything, it's all pretty much the same thing from a user perspective. Now, whether it's like you're talking about like the chain in terms of like proof of work, proof of stake, if it's L2, that's obviously different and people have opinions on that. But in terms of like a creator's perspective, I kind of feel like it's all the same. And a creator should just choose the chain that you kind of like look good next to. Like that's what I would say, like with Swatches, where people are looking at base collections, right? So when you like are standing next to these collections, which chain do you like kind of like where you look in that sense? That's kind of how I would approach it from a creator's perspective.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. And I think about that a lot as well, because I mean, when I first got into NFTs, I mean, Ethereum was the place to be. Joe and I talk about that all the time. Mainnet, we all paid outrageous amounts of gas just because that's where the liquidity was, that's where the interest was, and everybody was kind of tapping Ethereum mainnet, especially in the art world. The gold standard was mainnet. Then we definitely have seen this migration over the past year, with ordinals and Solana. And you point out D-Gods and Utes. I'm also a person, I don't own any of the D-Gods or Utes collection, but I'm a big fan of their art. I like Frank a lot. I think he does a great job. And him kind of going to Solana, flipping back to ETH, and now going back to Solana is interesting. But obviously, it's something that he saw like long term that there's a reason to be on Solana over mainnet. And I personally, is not being a bag holder at all. I think with their most recent move over to Solana and how high quality their art is, and how there's no real high end NFT collections over on Solana. I mean, there certainly are, but not a ton. I think D-Gods could easily become, a top tradable NFT. They're already one of the top over there on Solana. So it's interesting how collectors definitely have migrated now from mainnet over to Solana to Bitcoin ordinals, and Personally, I'm one of the guys that have been shopping around all the blockchains, and if there's something hot out there, I do find my way out there. And a lot of it's because of what I do for a living and wanting to educate myself on the chains. But also, there's liquidity that follows. I'm rambling on a little bit about different chains there. But with that all being said, I think you made a really good choice going on base. I'm a huge fan of that blockchain and kind of what they're doing, and being tagged the Chromie Squiggle of base is really, really cool.
Yeah. JVM, I have a question because we're in the Bay and you can't really walk a few blocks or, in my case, drive a few exits without seeing AI pretty much every single block, right? So my question is, I've actually, for the first time this year, actually seen some AI 10,000 PFP collections pop off. I haven't seen that before. With art, I haven't seen, or maybe there's been a ton of AI art that just tricked me and I thought it was generated. What's your thoughts on that kind of like weaving into either your work or just NFT art in general, or just art overall?
Specifically, the intersection of like AI generative art, like Midjourney and stuff, crossing over to crypto.
Yeah, either the crypto or what's your thoughts on it? Like, would you ever implement it? Because it's kind of creeping into all aspects of our lives, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, dude, like all my podcasts that I watch and all like my YouTube algorithm is just AI stuff right now. Like it feels like we're really at like a intersection now with like the world changing in a way. When Midjourney came out, like I don't remember when it was, maybe a year and a half ago to around 2 years ago. I was on it and I was like generating stuff. It was nowhere near as good as it is now, but it was right after I released Motorheads, and I was like, let's make some like cool motorcycle like generative stuff on Midjourney, and it shocked me. Like it's really really cool, and the stuff that you can generate on there is pretty insane. Especially like now, stuff looks like indistinguishable from reality. Um, I view the generative art tools, or I guess like AI art tools, as more like for my specific work stream, I view it as like an alternative to like a Google search. Because before, what I would do is like I would Google like an object that I'm trying to draw, but then now you can kind of get way more specific with what you were trying to like look at as a reference and then like implement in your work. So that's kind of how I haven't used it too recently because I haven't really been doing much hand drawing, but when I was, that's kind of where I saw the use case for it. But I definitely think, I mean, it's only gonna get more and more integrated into our lives, and it's pretty crazy, like how far we've come in such a short period of time. Uh, from like an artist perspective, I personally don't really vibe with like prompting and then calling that like an art piece of your own, just because of
Right.
the controversy of like where those images get trained from. But viewing it as more of a tool and not like the final art piece, I think is kind of where I see it. But yeah, I mean, dude, totally like people could do that. Like I don't know of any 10K PFP projects or any like large NFT projects that are fully like generated with AI. But like scripting that and getting that to work, I mean, that is not that hard to do. And the art will look good. So I don't know, maybe I'm like more of a traditionalist in that sense and like not wanting to accept the reality that we're kind of going towards, but that's kind of where my head is at. And I think for my specific art style, it doesn't work as well to like kind of pass it off as that, but maybe in the future it'll get that good.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah, one of the last questions from my end. Curious about like some of your favorite digital artists in the space and maybe some other NFT projects. I know you mentioned that you've been following a lot of AI, so curious what you think about On-Chain Gaia's that lives on the base network with Swatches.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff is all sick. All the projects on base, or like most of them that I see that are trending, I think are pretty quality. As in terms of like artists, I that I like look up to or like kind of view as inspirations. I think prior to Swatches, I definitely like a huge Snowflower fan from like way back in the day. And then more recently, I've been a big fan of the Opepen project by Jack Butcher.
Oh yeah.
That project is super sick, just conceptually, because you can take like a simple silhouette and like remix it infinitely, and like every artist can kind of like do their own signature on top of it. I'm actually working on an Opepen set submission right now that is like a Swatches style OPEPN. So we'll look out for that. But
That's awesome.
other than those two artists, one of my like bigger inspirations or like influences that kind of brought me into crypto or like solidified my thesis on crypto and like NFTs in general is a streetwear brand called the Hundreds. I'm not sure if you guys are
Oh
too
yeah.
Oh
familiar with
yeah,
them,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, they
The
have
giant
a
bomb, right?
yeah, the bomb, exactly. So when I was working at that NFT dev studio that I was mentioning before, they released like their Atom Bomb Squad collection, and I've been like a fan of the Hundred since I was like a little kid. So like seeing that like silhouette make its way into this space, which kind of felt like a different world, really like crossed those two paths for me, and I was like, oh shit, this is getting real. So that brand specifically is like very it has been an inspiration for me in multiple facets because of my streetwear past as well.
Really cool. You just brought up my last question as you were speaking. Just curious of your thoughts of those types of interactions that Jack Butcher has done. Right, he's done some burning mechanisms of checks, some DAO voting with that as well. With Web3 and all of the different mechanics that you can do. Is there anything that ideally you liked to participate in or have Swatches to be a part of or another collection as part of your artwork? Because that was a question I asked Grant to you, and which was, because art was just art, but with Web3, there's like a whole different
Right.
onset of things that you can do with art. So I wonder if that's kind of too loud, too noisy, or is there something that you want to participate in moving forward?
No, I definitely think there's something there in a lot of the ways that different art pieces can interact. I mean, at the very like base level, like very like the most simple level that you can kind of take from it is like prior to Swatches launching. Now that I have distribution with Swatches and Motorheads and various like one of one collections I've done, I've basically built like a a network or like a continual allow list almost for my future projects. So at the very like most simple level, that's kind of the direction I want to move towards is like um, not like a loyalty program situation, but like you know that these people are your like supporters, so then you reward those people. That's like the most simple way to do things, I feel. But getting more granular with like different mechanisms for burn and redeem and like different collections, like how Opepin works, where you can kind of take part in it. I have this concept that I'm working with that I have not started building, where I want to create this collection or tool or something where uh, the swatches like base essentially is a 3x3 grid of color and shapes, right? So like looking at the one of ones that we were mentioning before that are a part of the collection, I want to create like a tool or a collection in the future where we mint like blank canvases almost, and then anyone who mints those can basically submit their own like one of one swatch, and it would be like a community generated collection almost. I haven't worked out like the details for that or anything, and I'm actually working on a separate project right now that isn't that, that is semi related to swatches more aesthetically. So once that project is done, or like I mean, like you were saying before, the community is also like a body of people that are interested in swatches. So if someone in the community wanted to make something like that, I would be fully supportive of it, because that would be super sick. But if it doesn't get made by the community, I'll definitely be making something like that in the future.
I love it. Great idea. And you've absolutely been crushing it. Congratulations. Really excited to see what you're going to be doing with your Opepin now. Definitely everybody needs to check out Swatches, JVMI. I just want to give you a moment to maybe give a call out so people could find you or find the collection.
Yeah, sure. So my two main socials are on Warpcast or Farcaster and Twitter. So my Warpcast, I think, is just at JVMI. And then my Twitter is JVMI underscore. And then if you are on Warpcast, I would highly recommend checking out the Dash Swatches channel. That's where I'm posting everything up with like updates and like new project stuff. And that's where the community lives. And then other than that, I just have like a portfolio site, jvmi.art, that people can check out to see like all of my other work, whether it be streetwear, NFTs, or anything creative that I'm up to.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to take a look at your streetwear. I love your style. I love your art. So keep up the great work, and we really appreciate you jumping on the podcast.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.